to the first chapter of The Girl of Ink and Stars, the book that you've chosen for us to read together for our sort of book club reading book. So, great choice. Thank you to everybody that voted. And I hope you enjoy it. I'll try and check in every day with a new chapter, and then I'll just post some questions or ask some questions that you can then talk about, and then post the answers or any thoughts that you have on Shobi to me or to Shona in the reading section. Okay, so let's begin. So from the back of the book, the blurb. Each of us carries the map of our lives on our skin, in the way we walk, even in the way we grow. So, sounds magical? Before I start reading it, I will show you. There is a map at the beginning, the Isle of Joya. So we know that this is going to be where the story is set. Okay, let's make a start. Chapter 1. They say the day the governor arrived, the ravens did too. All the smaller birds flew backwards into the sea, and that is why there are no songbirds on Joya. Only huge, ragged ravens. I'd watch them perch on the rooftops like omens, and try to squint them into the chaffinches and goldcrests Dar drew from memory. If I imagined hard enough, I could almost hear them singing. Why did the songbirds leave, Dar? I'd ask. Because they could, Isabella. And the wolves? The deer? Dar's face would darken. Seems the sea was better than what they were running from. Dar would tell me another story then, about the girl warrior Arinta, or about Joya's mythical past as a floating island, and refused to say any more about the wolves and the backwoods birds. But I kept asking, until the day came when I found my own answers. The morning it began was like any other. I woke in my narrow bed, sunrise just starting to brighten the mud walls of my room. The smell of burnt porridge hung on the air. Dar must have been up for hours, as it took a long time for the fire to heat the heavy clay pot. I could hear Miss La, our hen, scratching outside my room seeking crumbs. She was 13 years old, same as me, but even though that's young for a person, it's very, very old for a chicken. Her feathers were grey, her mood was black, and even our cat Pep was scared of her. My tummy rumbled as I stretched my arms. Pep was sprawled across my legs, and he yowled loudly as I sat up. You awake, Isabella? Dar called from the kitchen. Morning, Dar. Porridge is nearly ready. A little over-ready, in fact. Coming, I eased my legs out and smoothed the cat's rough fur where it had ruffled in the night. Sorry, Pep. He purred and closed his eyes. I washed my face in the basin by the window and stuck a tongue out at the reflection in the polished metal above Gabbo's bed, straightening his sheets, dustier every day, but still made. The voice line arched next to his pillow, a long, thin hollow Dar had etched for us up the walls and over the ceiling. When we pressed our lips to it and whispered, it carried our voices so we could talk even when we were in each end of the room in our separate beds. 3 years now. 3 years since I sat there, my twin's hand fire in mine, as he faded into the night, fast as a blown-out match. But I could still conjure him, easy as breathing. It would not do to start the day sad. Shaking the thoughts out of my head, I pulled on my school dress. It was as big as it had been 6 weeks before. My best friend, Loops, would laugh. Still the shortest in the class, she'd say. I quickly braided my unbrushed hair and hoped Dar wouldn't notice I hadn't untangled it all summer. Pep was rolling on the bed, but I wasn't allowed to stroke him with my uniform on. My teacher, Senora Feliz, was always picking ginger hairs off my dress with irritated fingers. I pulled aside the curtain that served as my bedroom door and carefully stepped over Miss La, who squawked as I scattered her small pile of crumbs. She narrowed her misty eyes and pecked at my ankles, chasing me further into the main room where we ate, talked, and planned adventures. A big bowl of blackened porridge sat on our large pine plank table, marooned among the sea of maps. More of Dar's maps were stuck to the walls, and they rustled as I passed, like a talking breeze. I traced the papers with my finger, as I did every morning, watching how the silver pigment of Afric's rivers met with those of Egypt, how Egypt clung to the curve of Europa Bay, like one hand grasping another across the sea. On the opposite wall hung the sketchy coast of America, and its dragging ocean currents, labelled with strange, wondrous names: the Frozen Circle, the Vanishing Triangle, the Cerulean Sea. The paper was dyed a beautiful deep blue, and the currents were picked out in thread against it. Dar had used a needle as thin as a hair for these. Gold for cerulean, black for the triangle, white for the frozen circle. But past the eastern coast, everything stopped. Only one word broke the blankness. Incognito. Unknown. I could almost feel Dar's disappointment in the long dried ink of the word. Unfavourable tides on his last trip meant an early return to Joya, and Dar never made it again across that wild expanse before the governor arrived on our island. Governor Adori closed the ports and made the forest that stretched coast to coast between our village of Gomera and the rest of the island into a border, banishing anyone who resisted his rule to the other side. Gomera was cut off from the rest of Joya, and the forest was strung with thick thorns and enormous bells to warn the governor's guards if anyone came through. I'd never heard the bells ring. Dar dreamt of filling the gaps on his America maps, whereas what I wanted, more than anything else, was to cross the forest border and chart the forgotten territories which lay beyond, though I'd never told him so. There was only one map that showed the whole of our island, and it hung in Dar's study. I called it Mars Map, because it had been passed down through her family for generations. Maybe, ever since Arinta's time, 1,000 years ago. It always felt like a sign that Ma and Da were meant for each other, that he was a cartographer and her only heirloom was a map. Each of us carries the map of our lives on our skin, in the way we walk, even the way we grow, Da would often say. See here, how my blood runs not blue at my wrist but black? Your mother always said it was ink. I am a cartographer through to my heart. Fetch the jug, would you? Da's voice made me jump, pulling me back into the room. I dragged the chair to the shelves, carefully taking the jug from up high, and put it on the table next to the porridge. It was forest green and special because it was the last thing Ma made. We used it only on the first day of school, and on birthdays and feast days. Da kept it out of reach and washed it with great care. I could remember Ma sometimes, dark-eyed and mostly smiling, smelling of the black clay she worked with, making pots for the villagers and delicate pieces for the governor. Or maybe I imagined her, like the songbirds. Good morning, little one. Da limped from the kitchen. I rushed to take the milk pail and the cups he was carrying. You shouldn't walk without your stick, I scolded. Da had broken his leg as a young man, leaping from the jetty of an Egyptian port onto a moving ship, and now used a walking stick carved from a fragment of his great-grandfather's fishing boat. It was my favourite thing, out of the many favourite things in the room. Light as paper, it floated in even the thinnest skim of water, but most miraculously of all, it glowed in the dark. Da said it was because of the sap, but I knew it was magic. I hurried to clear a space on the shelf, shifting the Himalaya mountains onto the shelf. Da poured the milk into the Mars jug and then settled down on the bench next to me and grinned. Pick a pocket. I rolled my eyes. Left. He wiggled his eyebrows like two black caterpillars. Right answer. He pulled a small jar from his pocket. Pine honey. I unscrewed the lid and the smell filled my nostrils, making my mouth water. Thank you, Da. Nothing but the best for your first day back at school. I shrugged. It's only school. Oh, well, I suppose I'll just have to eat all of this myself then. He took the open jar and mimed pouring the honey into his mouth. No! I grabbed it back. You're right, it's a very important day. I'm only surprised you didn't get 2 jars. The honey was so good I hardly noticed the porridge was burnt. But when I looked up, Da's food was untouched. He was sitting in that hunched way that meant he was thinking. His hand rested on the milk jug, and I could see the pulse in his wrist. His eyes had a faraway look. First days of school were hard for both of us. I cleared away my bowl as quietly as possible and pushed his close to his hand. I'll see you later, Da. When he didn't answer, I picked up my satchel and left the house, closing the peeling green door gently behind me. And that's the end of chapter 1. So, I'm reading this one chapter ahead of you every time so that I know what's happening, but I've not actually read the whole book before, so it's exciting for me as well as for you to find out what's happening in the story. I hope you enjoyed chapter 1. Some of the things to think about are who are the characters that we know so far, what's the setting, what do we know about the characters and the place they live, and what does that reveal about their past, about their backstory, and what does it make you think that this story might be about or might happen next? So what kind of foreshadowing and inference has been written in to the first chapter to set the scene for us? And also, what is a cartographer? If you could make sure that you have a little think about that. What is their role? What is the job that a cartographer does? And any other thoughts and reflections that you have on chapter 1. So I look forward to reading chapter 2 with you tomorrow. Bye!